Hey everybody, welcome to Be You Only Better, or BYOB Audio. This podcast was started to help listeners like you find a way to be your best self, but not change who you are. We want you to be your best you while on a journey to a happier and more fulfilling life. Tune in to hear personal stories of how people face their fears and overcome their struggles to become a better version of themselves. Thank you for tuning in and hope you enjoy. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of BYOB Audio. Today I have the pleasure of introducing someone all the way from Budapest, Hungary. Today I have with me Tibor, and he is an amazing podcaster of the Mindset Horizon podcast. He's also a business coach and a mindset professional coach. So you better believe that we're going to have some awesome stuff today. And without further ado, Tibor, welcome to the show.
Hi, Josh. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to talking to you today.
Yeah, man, I'm super excited to have you. Can't wait to hear what you have to say. But go ahead and share a little bit more about you and a little bit more of what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for the introduction, and thanks for everyone listening to this podcast. I really appreciate this. My name is Tibor Nagy. I'm the host of the Mindset Horizon podcast, the founder of Mindset Horizon. And its core is really to help impact-driven entrepreneurs, change makers, and thought leaders to realize their full potential and execute on their dreams. So on the podcast, I interview a lot of entrepreneurs, personal development professionals, coaches, psychologists. We talk about possibilities. We talk about the mindset of possibility. So I really want to empower people with this information, with the knowledge that is available to us today. As just for me, I'm here in Hungary, but, we are connected via the internet. So I'm really fascinated with this, notion that we can learn a lot. And we have this possibility today because of the internet and technology, and we can share these things with others. So yeah, that's what I do. That's my main focus. I'm also a business coach. I'm also a podcast mentor, so I help coaches, thought leaders to launch their podcast. And it's a great medium. It's really a great medium. But I had a huge transitioning. So back then I used to work as an architect. Maybe we are going to dive deeper into this. And now I call myself, or today I rather call myself a growth mindset architect, because, my passion is really to how we can rewire our brain, overcome insecurities, limiting beliefs, and all those things that hold us back from reaching our full potential. So that's the core of Mindset Horizon, I would say.
Yeah, I love it, man. And I am actually subscribed to that podcast. He just brings a ton of energy and just such great things to listen. So, you definitely want to tune into his podcast also.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your favorite?
You know what? I've actually heard quite a few, but the reason why I'm going to go ahead and go into the next one is so that you can actually share a piece of what you share in that podcast. So we always, as all of our listeners know, we start the show off with a unique shot of wisdom. So this is actually where you get to share a little bit of what you do on your podcast with us. So what do you have for us today?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm coming back to the core of Mindset Horizon and the principle by which I live my life nowadays, which is really lifelong learning. So I really now have this new intro, and where I'm introduced as a lifelong learner, and it's connected to the principle of having a growth mindset or cultivating a growth mindset. This is a term which was coined by psychologist Carol Dweck. So she had this book on mindset, and she came up with this notion of having a growth mindset or having a fixed mindset. And having a growth mindset simply means that people with a growth mindset, they believe that their abilities, their skills and capabilities are something that can be developed over time. So they strongly believe that even if they fail at something at some point in their lives, they can actually develop those skills, and not just their skills, but also their belief systems, their identity. And this is just so fascinating to me because, I can become whoever I want to become if I'm really dedicated to this or committed to this principle of learning and growing and believing that my abilities, my identity, and everything is just something that is plastic and can be changed. And neuroplasticity is a notion that comes from neuroscience, and it's very much connected to the growth mindset principle. And neuroplasticity says that the brain has its ability to rewire itself, through new experiences, through novelty, through learning, especially in learning new languages. So, I speak German, I speak English, and I really realized when I was living in Germany and I needed to master the German language in order to be able to work there as an architect, like my brain was really just expanded. So that's how I actually came up with this idea of horizon, like expanding your minds, and that's why mindset horizon. My mind was expanded, and so, for example, learning languages is something that can boost neuroplasticity and really help you just rewire your brain. For example, the Germans think differently when they, structure different statements, and you just start to think differently. You start to put together sentences and things that you want to say in a different structure, which means you are actually thinking differently. So the brain requires this novelty, new experiences through learning, through experiences, through traveling. And this is some of the things I would recommend to the listeners doing, um, exposing themselves to new experiences and learnings. And also one of the things that I do, something that you can do at home, besides learning, of course, is creative visualization. This is something I use during meditation. So I simply visualize some of the things that I want to achieve. I don't really want to go into too much details, but that's again something that you can use to rewire your brain. Basically, you are, mentally rehearsing different experiences in your mind. So without, going anywhere, it's just happening in your mind. So yeah, growth mindset, that's a great principle to, I think, to learn more about.
Yeah, I love that. And you asked me what was my favorite part, and I was actually going to bring up the neuroplasticity, but then I kind of figured you were going to go that direction, so I don't want to spoil it. That's kind of where I was going.
Yeah. I mean, that's really fascinating. You're right, because I was talking about this in the last two of my solo
Yeah,
episodes.
yeah, you have a couple parts on it.
Yeah. So I'm doing these solo episodes because I want to deconstruct topics that I would love to talk more about in the future. And the growth mindset principle and neuroplasticity is really one of those. And they are just so important to like really embrace and live by those principles. Because, you know, um, even if you had trauma or any kind of bad experiences, the brain can, rewire itself. And anything that could help, like coaching, when, for example, a coach asks you different questions, help you see things from a different perspective, all those things are a great way to, experience new possibilities. So that's why I'm, fascinated with this.
Yes, definitely. So, you bring up bad experiences and the fact that you're a coach, usually that means that you've gone through something, you know, that made you struggle and you overcame it. You became better, and now you have this passion for wanting to help people through that. So, with that said, what would you consider was your biggest struggle? And go ahead and share that story around that.
Yeah, man, that's a great question. I think my biggest struggle was about 4 years ago when I moved out to Germany. So I was living in Hungary. I was working here as an architect, and I felt I was underpaid. So that was my biggest pain point. That was my biggest struggle. I felt I just wasn't paid well enough. I thought I had a master's degree in architecture, and I thought I just, should earn more, should be able to earn more. And since I spoke different languages, I was always playing with this idea of moving abroad. And I was looking for international job opportunities. So I always wanted to use different languages at work. Like I wanted to have an international job. And I just moved out to Germany. I had an opportunity there. So I was looking for opportunities there. I was learning the language already when I was living in Hungary. Like I was preparing for moving abroad, and I found an opportunity there. And I started to earn the money that I was always missing. And I had this security in my life, so to speak, when I started to earn this money. So, I could travel a lot more. I could, buy different stuff. So I felt that, I really have the money that I was missing. And I kind of like felt this void, like what's next. So I didn't really have a long-term goal for my life. I didn't really have a long-term vision. And as I was thinking about what's next, I wasn't even sure that I wanted to live in Germany. So, for example, family and living close to my family was always important to me, and I felt that I wanted to have some kind of flexibility and freedom. So, living in Germany was for me a little bit like too much sacrifice. Like I started to earn the money, but I felt that I'm living far away from my family, and why, right? So why did I decided to do so? Was it because of the money? And so I didn't really have concrete goals and especially longer term visions. And I started to think about different things, right? So I started to ask uh, different questions. I started to question everything that I had been following, like the path, going to university, getting a good job, climbing the ladder, all those things. Like I was just questioning a lot of things in my life, I guess. So I was around 27, 28 years old. And I didn't really feel fulfilled or happy. I didn't really enjoy my job. It was very technical. So after finishing my studies as an architect, I chose a very technical field in Hungary because of the money. So I knew that engineers and people in the technical field and sales and production, especially at international companies, um, you earn more than, for example, an architect in a small office as an architectural designer. So I kind of like consciously chose that direction, but I would say, in hindsight, it was just because of the money. And so I was struggling a little bit in Germany. Like I didn't really feel I have this vision and longer term goal. And I figured that I want to create my own flexibility, my own freedom in my life, which brought me to entrepreneurship. And as I was learning the German language there, like I was mastering, like I was always practicing the German so that I could express myself at work as an architect. There were a lot of difficult words. So I was always on weekends, I remember on weekends, I was doing these online language courses all the time. And I figured that, here I am learning the language, like I should read books. And if I should read books, like what are some of the topics I would be interested in? And I figured I could read on entrepreneurship and personal development. So I started to read, to be honest, German books on entrepreneurship, business, marketing. Like I wanted to learn more about entrepreneurship and how to become an entrepreneur, how to start your own business. And because of the flexibility and freedom that I mentioned, some of my really important values, I I got really fascinated with this idea of starting something online or creating an online business where you can basically be very flexible. You can build a virtual team or whatever you want. So that's the path I have been following since then. And as I was reading different books on entrepreneurship, I also got really interested in the personal development aspect of an entrepreneurial journey because first and foremost, when you are transitioning from, let's say from the corporate field to entrepreneurship, like you have this identity who is completely like you have this completely different identity in the corporate field. I was like an architect, I considered myself to be an architect, and now I have to cultivate this identity of being an entrepreneur who is able to create something from scratch. And so there is a big identity shift when you are transitioning from the corporate world or even from a completely different field to a completely new one. So I was an architect, now I do podcasts, coaching, and all these things. Like there's a huge transformation, and this is what I'm passionate about to talk about in the podcast as well, the Mindset Horizon podcast, because entrepreneurship is cool, but you have to be able to build a lot of things around that journey. For example, your identity, your belief systems, your mindset, and it's all above skills and capabilities. Like, learning the marketing and business strategies, that's cool, but that's not gonna allow you to have this identity to follow through on your goals. Because and Tony Robbins said that very well. So he said, you know human beings follow through on who they believe they are. So there's a great book by James Clear. It's called Atomic Habits. He talks about habits and behaviors, but actually he also talks about what identity is driving your actions and behaviors. Every action is belief driven. So beliefs are below identity. Identity is kind of like the highest level. So if you can cultivate this identity of being a successful entrepreneur and believing that before you even get there, this is what will allow you to take those action steps towards that vision. So back to my story, basically my struggle, I kind of like went deeper into this field and I got really interested in this. And I just wanted to live this. Like, I was captivated by a show, Impact Theory, with Tom Bilyeu. So that was one of my favorite shows. And I was like, man, I just want to create something very similar in the future. I didn't really believe at that time that I could. It was about 3-4 years ago. I was like, who am I to start a podcast? Who am I to have a show? But I just had this vision and I just kept moving towards that vision.
Man, that is awesome. So definitely a lot to take in there, but I actually want to backtrack to when you were in school. One thing that fascinates me is there's this common theme, even you being so far away, that, hey, you're going to go to school, you're going to get a good job, you're going to graduate, you're going to get a good job, and you're going to make all this money, and you're going to be happy, and
Yeah.
went through that. You went to school, you got a master's degree, you went to be an architect, and still you felt unfulfilled ultimately, where you eventually got to the point where you were making money, but you had less family time and you were craving obviously more family time, more flexibility, and a couple of those things. And I just think it's crazy, or maybe it's not crazy, but it's just crazy how that happens here all too often. And that's happening over there too is just mind-blowing, for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I just didn't know any better. So I was following the path that was, in front of me. Like that was, everybody was, going to school, everybody was going to university. I went to an academic grammar school. That's I don't know how it's called in the US, but that's kind of like a higher or a better high school, so to speak. And then everybody was going to universities. Like, there was no question if you want to do something else, right? So I was kind of like following the crowd, so to speak, and I didn't know any better. So when I was living in Germany, as I mentioned, I really questioned everything. Like, I was trying to also connect with myself. So I went through a coach training program that helped me a lot. So I was learning about coaching, and I was also coached and came up with my values, was connecting with my, deeper self. And I figured that, exercise, personal development, and all these things were really important in my life.
Yes.
And those were kind of like my passions. Like, I always just love this idea of holistic development and like exercise, learning, and things like that. And I was like, that's my passion. Why don't I just build something around that? And so when you build something around your passion, like, I'm also fascinated with this idea of building a business around your passion. And that's what I was trying to do. That's what I'm actually doing. And when you have this passion, which you can actually cultivate over time. So passion comes from curiosity. So what are you curious about? What are you interested in, right? And I was interested in exercises and personal development and learning and things like that. And I was like, what am I doing then, right? So I was working as a sales support engineer and project manager in a very technical field. And I was like, man, I kind of like, I don't know. So I have these passions, and yeah, just one word on purpose. Like when you turn your passion, um, so when you serve others with your passion, that's when you are actually starting to live your purpose. So um, the passion is for something for you as a person, and when you serve other people with your passions, that's basically becoming your purpose. Because with the podcast I do the same, right? I want to teach others, I want to empower others. That's kind of like my purpose. And in the future I really want to create content and digital products around these topics, so that I can help others to grow and, you know, start their business, start their podcast, spread their message. Yeah, so those are some of the
Yeah.
examples.
No, I love that. So, honestly, I think that is amazing advice. And, one of the things that you'd mentioned was having a sense of identity, how, you were kind of just going along with the flow, kind of living someone else's life or doing
Mhm.
things just because other people were doing it. And I feel like the people who do that end up being unhappy. Now, whether you want to start a business or not, I think you should always assess your sense of identity, like what it is that you like and what you're passionate about, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, curiosity is a huge thing. I talked about this in the podcast. I think the reason why I ended up doing what I'm doing today, which I'm telling you, 4 years ago, I would have never imagined that I do something like this. I was just following my curiosities. Like I got interested in entrepreneurship, personal development, and I was going down that road, right? So I was just following that. I had a lot of fears. I had a lot of questions. I felt lost. So first of all, I felt lost. So anyone is thinking I was cool and I was, fearless. It wasn't the case. So I was, you know, I had a lot of fears. What's going to happen? Like I felt I didn't know where I was going, right? So I was experimenting with different things. I'm going to be a coach. I'm going to learning this. I'm going to be doing that. And what I can say, there was actually Tom Bilyeu who said in one of his videos, the host of Impact Theory, yeah, one of my favorite shows I already mentioned. He said, "Don't be afraid to be lost for a while." So especially when you're transitioning, like there's gonna be, 1 year, maybe 6 months, maybe 2 years, maybe 4 years, that you're gonna feel, just you are lost because you don't really know what product or idea will execute on, or what's gonna be, the business that you're going to focus on in the next couple of years. So you're going to feel lost. That's part of a process. And if you want to kind of do this, you have to accept that, it's really part of the process.
Yeah. So let's say, just to add some value for our listeners here, let's say someone who's struggling with their identity, who they feel lost. What would you say would be the best first step to take in order to, regain their sense of identity and kind of get over,
Mm.
that lost feeling?
Yes, wonderful question. So I always start with awareness. And I kind of like developed this formula. It's called the AIM formula: awareness, intention, mindset, mastery. So AIM is the acronym, and awareness is really the part where you start uh, getting in touch with yourself, getting to know yourself even more. So, for example, journaling can be something that could help, like communicating or getting in touch with your higher self. So for example, journaling and meditation is something that absolutely helped me, in the last 3-4 years. Also coaching. There are different approaches, I would say. So meditation is something that can help. Being in solitude, being in silence, you can just connect with your higher self. This is when you can go a little bit higher, let's say, and you can just, you know, uh, connect with your deeper self, I would say. So meditation and journaling, like being in solitude and, putting down your thoughts, it also helps you raise your awareness around who you are or what you want, what you really want, because sometimes our inner voice is really drowned out by the outer noise, by media, by people around us, people's expectations, friends want this from us, parents want other things from us, and we have all these expectations around us. But what is it that I really want, right? So being in solitude and like just contemplating on those things is really important, and it helped me a lot. So I to be a little bit more specific, I really have a morning routine where I journal and meditate, right? So first of all, I journal. um, Most of the time I just put down thoughts that come to my mind in the morning. Like, what are some of the thoughts that are going through my mind right now? That's the self-awareness and also mindfulness part. Like, I'm just becoming aware of my thoughts. Like, that's the metacognition. I think in psychology they call it metacognition, the ability to observe your own thoughts. And then I meditate, where I use creative visualization. I come up with different images in my head. For example, one of the most common images for me is me speaking on stage in front of a huge audience. I imagine myself doing that and speaking and things like that. So those are much more connected to my vision. So I would say first is self-awareness, and the second is intention or vision. So I talked about vision when I talked about creative visualization, but really you want your identity to be based on your vision. Like, what is it that you really want? And you can have visions in different areas, for example, business, personal life, health, um, and whatever area you have a vision in. So you can mentally rehearse those visions. And especially when it comes to identity, you want your identity to be identified or based on those visions, based on your future self, so to speak. So in the future, I am an author, I am an international speaker. So whatever I do today is actually based on that vision. And we talked about this in my podcast with Dr. Benjamin Hardy. So he was really, really great. He's the best-selling author of the book Willpower Doesn't Work. And he has a really great book coming up. It's called Personality Isn't Permanent. And he talks about this a lot. Like, he talks about this identity and confidence a lot. And he talks about the future self, which is also connected to growth mindset, to the growth mindset principle and neuroplasticity. So your identity should be based on your future self, who you are aspiring to become, right? And not, for example, your past or something like that. Like, if your identity is pulled by a vision, by your future self, you're going to take the action steps. And again, every action is belief driven, and more importantly, driven by your identity. And in the present moment, you're going to take actions towards that future self, towards that vision. So I think that's a great thing to keep in mind. And also mindset mastery. When I say mindset mastery in the formula, I mean the mentally rehearsal part. So when you come up with these visions and the ideal future self, you want to keep revisiting, keep mentally rehearsing these visions. Like, every single day when you do meditation or creative visualization, you want to connect with your future self. And it's something, for example, that works in sports as well. Like, if you want to lose weight or something, you can just imagine yourself having less weight, and you are kind of like connected to that, to your better self, and you are acting towards that vision. So it is something that actually helped me with doing more exercises, being more consistent with my exercises. So I imagine myself as my ideal, in my ideal form, let's say so, and I'm acting towards that ideal self.
Yeah, that is awesome. I love that you even broke it down into steps. And I was actually I'm taking notes as you're going, man, because this is really, really good. Um, actually, earlier you had mentioned James Clear's book on habits, and I actually really, really like that book. And I think that, where you're talking about identifying yourself based on your future self is kind of one of the things that he talks about in terms of establishing a good habit. You know.
Absolutely, absolutely, because they also realize that um, whenever you want to change a behavior, you have to be able to change your identity, shift your identity. And how can you do that? Like, you have to come up with a future self, like a vision for yourself, and then acting from that vision so that you can actually change your actions in the present moment. So yeah, that's a really, really interesting thing. If you want to check out something else, and the listeners maybe, neurolinguistic programming, there's a so-called model. It's called the neurological levels, and the neurological levels talks about this notion and concept of identity being as a driving level. And yeah, and it's a pyramid actually, and in the pyramid, identity is the highest level and actions is almost the lowest. Like, the lowest level is environment. um, and there are different levels, for example, belief systems and values, and also skills and capabilities. So yeah, it's an interesting concept. So if you want to check out neurolinguistic programming.
Very cool. So we can definitely tell that you're amazingly knowledgeable. So all of that extra studying and hard work and building your businesses has definitely paid off, because I mean, it just all kind of spews out of you just so easily, right?
I yeah, sometimes I have difficulties with the language. So but it's also an internal process for me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no worries.
yeah.
No worries at all. So the reason I bring that up is, I can definitely tell that you are just absolutely passionate about what you're talking about and what you have to share and your story. So I actually want to kind of figure out when that moment was for you that you just found out, hey, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm going to pursue. And, take us back to that time.
Wow, that's an amazing question. And you know what? So about 3 or 4 years ago, I started to question everything. And then I went down the path of learning and diving deeper into entrepreneurship. But I felt lost for about 1 or 2 years, right? So that's why I talked about this idea of feeling lost. And I didn't really know where I was going. So I went to startup accelerator programs. I thought that, I want to start something there. And I visited different events. I became part of the Mind Valley community. I went to the Mind Valley University. Sorry. So, and then, I was exploring. I was looking for things. And to be honest with you, I started the podcast almost a year ago, and I was dreaming about starting the podcast about 1.5, 2 years ago, but I didn't have the courage. So I had different fears. But to be honest, you know, embracing this idea of learning and having the growth mindset and sharing information with others, creating digital products or content, that came to me through the podcast. So, and I would say that's my path. So I really felt that, I was following. Before that, I went through a coach training program, and I was kind of like experimenting with different things, but I felt that this medium is really something that I could say 100% yes to, right? So I felt that I kind of like arrived to the point where I can say, this is something I really want to go deeper into. So I was committed to learn a lot about this medium and things like that. So I felt that this is something that could help, and not just help, but very much resonating with who I am and with my values. So, for example, I wanted to have a positive impact on others. I wanted to empower others. I wanted to also scale my brand, like building my brand online, also building my network, getting in touch with others, learning from others. So all those things, like for me, podcast is really just a lifelong learning tool. Really, like I was amazed by this format of interviewing others and talking about things that I usually always learn about. Like I read a book or I listen to a podcast. Like I was just, this is so cool that I can do it too. And I found this medium. And to be honest, you can do video interviews as well, so it doesn't have to be a podcast. I was always a podcast listener. Like I usually go to the gym or when I do exercise. This is the time when I actually listen to podcasts. So I don't really listen to podcasts at home, but when I'm on my way to somewhere, or I exercise, or I go for a walk or running. So yeah, I really love audio content.
No, I love that. And I'm right there with you in terms of, the podcast and just being able to reach people. I absolutely love that. So especially
Yeah.
the times now, I think it's extremely important to just stay excited about things, So what is the one thing you are most intoxicated about today?
Ooh, yeah. I think it's really the growth mindset principle. Like this notion of we have limitless potentials. Like limitless in the sense that we can't really see what our limit is, right? So I can't really tell you what's my limit right now. So I'm kind of like, I'm excited to learn because I'm excited where I can go, what else I can do, what else I can learn. Like, I learned German and English, and I was like, man, I could do such things. Like that was really belief system changing, transforming. Because yeah, and through those experiences, you can actually challenge belief systems and what you're capable of, and exploring your potential. So I think that's the topic. Like we are limitless.
Yeah, I love that. That is amazing. And so now, Tibor, it is time for our sips of success. And these are just quick questions for our audience to learn a little bit more about you. You ready?
Woo. I am ready.
All righty. Well, here we go. So who would you say is your biggest hero?
Oh yeah, I would say Tom Bilyeu. So I really like that guy, host of Impact Theory, one of my favorite shows. I already mentioned today. Yeah, Robin Sharma was one of my first gurus, so to speak. Started to read his books, and I admire Vishen Lakhiani. He's the founder of Mindvalley, so I really like the company concept that they built and what they did with Mindvalley.
Oh man, love that. So what is your favorite way to de-stress?
Yeah, awesome question. I would say meditation. So whenever I feel stressed, even throughout the day, I usually sit down and meditate. So I use relaxing music and I do some visualization that gets me inspired and things like that. One of my other ways, or another way, is going to the sauna. So I had this routine before COVID-19. On every Friday evening, I used to go to the sauna where I could relax and meditate also, and contemplate and reflect on my week, so to speak. So that was my reflection, solitude time. Now I don't go to the sauna, but I'm hoping that I can go very soon.
Yeah, man, that is so great. I actually own a spa. We have a sauna, but we're just dying to open. So
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I get into different states in the sauna. Like I can really relax, and I feel that I can tap into my intuition. So some really great ideas are coming to me in the sauna. I have to dive deeper into the science of it, but I think my brain gets into alpha, maybe theta brainwave states, so maybe I can relax more. Yeah, so I love that.
Yeah, so that's awesome because you get to relax, and restore your body mentally and physically. That's great.
Ooh, yeah. Love it, love
Okay.
it.
So, what was the best advice given to you that helped you through a tough time?
Ooh, yeah, it was given to me, I would say, by a lot of people. And there, I mean, through podcasts, for example, I remember Gary Vee was talking about this. Don't be so considered about what other people think of you. So I was really, um, concerned. I was really concerned about what other people thought of me, especially when I started to put myself out there online with my with my website, social media pages, and also the podcast. Like, best advice, just don't care what others think of you. Like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that is great. I'm a huge Gary Vee fan, just FYI, and so that.
Yeah, I mean, you want to focus on what's your truth, and even if, because there are going to be people um, who might say something that you don't like, or they don't agree with what you believe in, or what you are actually what you stand for, and that's okay, because many people think differently, and what you need to follow is your truth, right? So
Definitely.
that's really important, because on social media and online, we could be very um, concerned about what other people will comment on our posts and things like that, if they will listen to the podcast, or anything that it can discourage you. But I would say just follow your truth.
There you go. Well, speaking about your truth, go ahead and share one of your personal habits that help you be your best self.
Ooh, that's amazing. Yeah, I would say the best one is really the visualization. So when I do this creative visualization during meditation, it is something where I can connect with my best self, right?
Yeah.
And that's my best practice. I can get into inspired states, and that's really important. Energy and state is really important to to get yourself motivated.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that, you visualize yourself on stage, that you're giving all these talks, because I thought I was crazy for doing that, like I thought I was by myself.
It's totally normal. Totally normal. And there's one great book, maybe for the listeners, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Dr. Joe Dispenza. He comes from neuroscience and epigenetics, and he dives deeper into this science. So I touched on this, like creative visualization, and transforming your identity and your being. But he dives deeper into this science in his book. So that's a great book I read
Awesome.
from Dr.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you for that recommendation. So
sure.
here's the last kicker question, okay?
Yeah.
How do you define happiness and success?
Ooh, yes. This is an awesome question. And, this is the biggest question of humanity. And I actually really like, especially happiness, right? But I really like a quote by Tony Robbins. And he said, if you are not growing, you're dying inside. And so I truly believe this is really true. I couldn't agree more. Like, human beings are built to grow. We just sometimes don't know in which area to grow. So we need to kind of find this area, find this field where we really want to grow, like for us, for you or for me, this growth mindset, and empowering others, and learning more about these things, learning more about the fascinating science behind it. So we are built to grow, really. So I think that's the core of happiness. When you feel that you grow every single day, that's when you can become fulfilled and also happy, because you are having this progress, and this is what we need. And I also believe that, for example, when it comes to success, it's really important to share your success with others. So human beings crave human connections. So, for example, I don't know how much you work online or offline, but I work a lot online nowadays, and especially because of COVID-19. But we are actually hardwired for human connection, like in-person connection. And this is something that comes from positive psychology, actually. So there are some studies on this, that this is really important for us to be happy. So when it comes to success, I would say it's even better when you can, share your success with others, with your team and things like that. So that's kind of like my ideas on happiness and success.
I love it, man. That is so awesome. So Tibor, now time for last call, and this is where you can end with your parting piece of advice for our listeners, and then go ahead and end with the best way that we can connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I really want to just emphasize this growth mindset principle. So whenever you feel maybe lost or you don't have the empowering belief system, think about that you can, become better. There are some practices out there that can help you. You can start your business. You can start whatever you want if you have this vision and commitment. And my podcast, the Mindset Horizon podcast, can absolutely help with that. And so you can check out the podcast on our website, mindsethorizon.com. And as I mentioned in the beginning, I support impact-driven entrepreneurs, coaches, and change makers to put themselves out there online. So I'm a podcast strategist. I help them launch their podcast, and also business coach. So yeah, just get in touch. Let me know who you are.
Oh, love it. Awesome, man. Well, Tibor, it was an absolute pleasure to get to hear your story, get to hear your words of wisdom. Like I said, you are truly wise, and we are better for hearing what you had to say today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Josh. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Vielen Dank für Ihre Zeit.
Vielen herzlichen Dank und auf Wiedersehen.
Yeah. Auf Wiederhören.
Auf Wiederhören. Keep on learning, man.
Yeah. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of BYOB Audio. We hope you found something valuable from the stories shared today. Make sure you subscribe and share with someone who may need to hear something from this podcast. See you next time, but here's to you on your journey to a happier and more fulfilling life. Cheers!